welcome to the bullpen. All right, in the bullpen today, we have Mr. Sam Rao. Sam is going to talk about why he believes Section 230, which was basically constructed in 1996, that gives social media companies or platforms immunity virtually from liability, civil liability. He believes appealing it would be a mistake. All right, Sam, welcome to the bullpen. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me this afternoon.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for the op-ed. Let's talk about why you believe that the repeal of Section 230 would be a disaster. I don't know what you believe about it beyond that, but I will opine after you provide that information.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of conversation around Section 230 from really both sides of the aisle, having a lot of concerns with the role that social media and the internet plays in our modern politics, our public discourse. So much of the division across our country, so much information getting spread around, a lot of times misinformation, as a lot of people call it. But the underlying factor is that Section 230 is what protects each and every one of us to have that freedom of speech online, to be able to have so many platforms that really allow us to express ourselves and live out our different lives. And so while this generally is presented as, an immunity for the big tech companies from lawsuits, what it also does is create legal protection for so many smaller platforms, so many niche interest areas that really protect the dissidents, protect the people with different political interests that may otherwise be scorned and cast aside. Protects the new media outlets like yours that are face much more scrutiny than the big incumbents that have millions of lawyers to rely upon. And so I think a lot of the heat against this law, while there are certainly concerns to be had with social media, certainly conversations to be had about how we can make a better world, it's really misplaced to come after this law that is protecting so many of these different platforms.
It's interesting because I have seen Section 230 be something that was hardcore protected by the left and hardcore fought by the right. And now you see a blending of sorts. You see bipartisan efforts in order to create some level of reform. So let's go to the middle. Let's not go extreme one way or the other. Let's talk about the real reason why you have bipartisan support to do something about Section 230. Number one, it was created in 1996, okay? So in 1996, you have Section 230, which basically said, listen, if you're going to be a platforming company, we're not going to hold you accountable as we would a publishing company, thus allowing the individual publisher, meaning the everyday person, will be responsible for their content. That was basically the framework of Section 230 in 1996. You move forward, fast forward, you get a lot of technology, you have massive growth. You also have individuals who are minors who are part of these massive platforms. And in a way, you have a level of regulation. The regulation comes through the Safe Tech Act, 2023. Regulation comes through various court decisions where the US Supreme Court, they couldn't figure out if you have an algorithmic model, does that then classify you as more of a publishing arena, or are you still squarely within the arena of Safe 230 section, social media platform? And so these things became de facto regulations. Well, all right, that's kind of piecing it here and there. What's the ultimate goal? The goal is to make sure that it remains safe while at the same time not overregulated. So how do you get to that place? So my opinion, here's my opinion. And I know some Democrats are going to agree and disagree, which is fine. At least we're having the discussion. Section 230 has to evolve. And the reason why it has to evolve is because it's a tech regulatory dynamic. And if you simply have no regulation on Section 230, you run the risk of not only engaging in libel, as well as inappropriateness to minors, you run the risk of some actual criminal things being able to be echoed inside of these chambers known as social media. So I would I would recommend a reform. Are you against any type of reform when it comes to 230?
Well, I think the conversation it's less about Section 230 being altered as an existing law and more about building upon the framework at which it started. I think addressing this issue as individual bad actors being held accountable rather than the platform. If we did away with it completely, obviously you would not be able to post on social media without prior vetting. It would be a complete disaster. But taking stronger measures against those bad actors, against the different specific areas where we're particularly concerned, whether that's, serious crimes, copyright issues, different things with artificial intelligence now. I think those are individual conversations to be had.
Okay.
But I think addressing this as though we should be holding the platforms, which, again, we think about so much about big tech, but the majority of the internet is small form pages, individual websites, different video upload. I mean, it's so many different platforms where people post comments and threads, and so many of them could be put at risk. And I think that much more of the focus should be on having those conversations in those specific areas, and then actually engaging with the tech companies and putting pressure on them, less so through specific legislation, but more through the conversation, the culture, to say, look, we want your algorithms to have a little bit more push to them, and whatever format that is. Maybe some people want some more transparency. I think those are all reasonable discussions to be had, but I think rolling back Section 230 would get us further from the point of having that better future than moving forward. And I think we really need to be moving forward at this point.
And for those who are wondering who would want to repeal it, well, there's an interesting argument, a novel argument that says if you repeal 230, it then forces the social media platforms themselves to engage in self-regulation, because they would then be civilly liable for content that creates some type of civil liability for another human being. Which would mean, hey, all right, so now you have a self-regulatory dynamic. You don't have to get involved in legislative regulation. You've built one in because you've eliminated their immunity to prosecution, to civil liability. I think that's a fair argument. Now, does that argument create a disaster? Let me ask you, do you believe that it is a right to be on a social media platform?
I don't think you have any right to be on a specific platform. And actually, under Section 230, the very point is that the platforms themselves can moderate their own content.
Correct.
They can determine, okay, Blue Sky has much stricter rules at this point than X does. And that's for a reason, because the people that want to use that platform prefer that environment. So no, there's certainly not a right to it, but there is a right to free expression and free speech in a broader sense. And that needs to come forward through our laws to try to push forth the broadest amount of opportunity for people to engage with that. And I think thinking through that when addressing these issues is so important, while not, taking that extra step to say, you have a right to be on Instagram. You certainly do.
Right. There are some people, and I'm thankful that you are a learned individual. There are some people who will gaslight and say, no, you have a right to be on these platforms, and naturally you don't. You literally sign a waiver to gain access to it, which proves this is not a right if you have to sign a waiver saying you will follow the rules and conduct as it stands. I will say this: we've had this debate multiple times at Indisputable. I do believe it's moving in the direction of bipartisan legislation, but we are in the midst of the most polarized modern political context, at least I've seen in my generation. It will be difficult if somebody wants to politicize this rather than getting down to the substantive capacity that it may have. What say you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think there's so much concern with political violence, with hate speech, with a whole lot of different issue areas where so many people quickly, cite their examples, their side of the concerns, fears that their group, their party is being targeted. And they don't encompass both sides. They don't encompass all the people, and try to make measures that will broadly protect all of us and make sure that we live in a fair, safe, and free country.
Yeah, I appreciate your argument, sir. It does have integrity, even if we disagree on some of the finer points. Definitely want to have you back on the show. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'd be glad to join.